And a happy Friday to you. It is the 17th of September today, and I'm super stoked to be with you as I am every single Friday at 4 p.m. New Zealand time, 2 p.m. Aussie time. And we've got a great show for you this week. Lots happening in the e-commerce and digital space this week. Huge announcements by lots of different technology platforms, providers, vendors, retailers. Some profit announcements, or at least earnings announcements also this week that we will cover off. Some challenges to the industry that we're dealing with this week as well. And then I've also got some other things to talk about in relation to the podcast, the episode that was released yesterday, as well as a exciting party or event that I've got planned around the 100th episode of the podcast, which is due to come out shortly in October. So we're on track to do our 100th episode of the podcast released in late October. So I'm super excited about lots and lots of stuff. So super exciting to be with you here again, as I am every single Friday at 4 p.m. New Zealand time. And as per usual, basically, if you have any comments for me, any questions, I treat this session almost like a bit of an Ask Me Anything session, an AMA. So feel free on the live stream in LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, feel free to produce and enter any commentary or any questions that you have. And once I get through the news of the week along with my commentary, I will come back to your questions and comments if there are any, and I'll speak to those and I'll say g'day to you guys. So thank you very much for sharing your time with me. I always appreciate it. I know that everybody's busy and that everything is a little bit crazy town with COVID at the moment. And so anytime you choose to spend with me on a Friday afternoon, I always appreciate it. So without further ado, I will get into the news of the week. Now, one of the biggest pieces of news that came out this week is that the department store Myer, operating in Australia, Myer, M-Y-E-R, returns to profitability after 4 years of no profits or actually losses over the last 4 years. However, it continues to withhold dividends, and this is a report from Power Retail. Basically, they had an impressive financial 2021, according to them, and they had an increase of 5.5% in total sales to $2.658 billion. And so obviously still generating massive amounts of revenue, never mind profitability, but certainly driving massive amounts of retail sales through their retail chain and online. And as I said, it's the first time being profitable since 2016. And they have suspended their dividends because if you were to take out their JobKeeper subsidies, their statutory after-tax profit of $46.4 million, which was up from a loss of $172.4 million in financial year 20, they would have actually made a slight loss, because I think the number was they received about $50 million in wage subsidies, statutory profit of $46.4 million. So obviously, if you take the $50 million out of the business, you would have a statutory loss, I think, in the neighborhood of around $4 million, $3.5 million. So anyways, still good for them. Good effort, to turn around the ship. It's been a hard fought effort. Now, I want to call out specifically congratulations to their omni-channel and e-commerce efforts. They had a stronger than expected online growth, 27.7% increase in online sales to $539 million. And that represents 20.3% of total sales, up from 7%. Now, that is an astronomical jump. And I would like to congratulate Nicola Clement, GM Omni Experience. I've known Nicola for many years. Congratulations to her and her omni-channel team for creating a good online experience for their customers and for growing so rapidly as a percentage of sales. Now, obviously, ongoing lockdowns in Australia have contributed to the demand online, which is awesome. But the fact that they've managed to capitalize and consolidate on that and continue to grow their share of online sales now to where it's 20.3% of total sales is online. That's an impressive number. So congratulations to Myer. I know there's a lot of naysayers around Myer out there, and look, whether this continues for Myer remains to be seen, but they're definitely on the path to recovery, it feels like. But to only have I guess $46.4 million worth of profits on $2.658 billion in sales is a tough it feels like you're almost working for nothing, but still good effort on their part to turn around the ship from a loss of $172.4 million the year before. And I'm sure their shareholders will be breathing a sigh of relief as a result. So good job, Meyer, and good luck on that will hopefully be able to continue into financial year 2022. Now, if we look at also another report out of Power Retail, that Australian listed e-commerce index companies grew 13.5%, and they outperformed the ASX 200. So the Australia Stock Exchange All Ordinaries 200, top 200 in the last 90 days. Australian listed e-com index grew an average of 13.5% compared to the average on the ASX of 0.7% growth. So clearly anything to do with e-commerce, anything to do with online is absolutely killing it, not only in terms of revenue, profitability, etc., in conjunction or in comparison to their physical retail counterparts, but I guess when we compare them to other companies that aren't necessarily retail businesses, their growth is trumping kind of all at the moment, and that is being reflected in share price growth and in valuations by investors, and they're absolutely killing it. And they called out a couple of key brands that are driving very, very well in terms of share price growth, and they called out Satire. They've clawed back their position over the last 90 days, growing from $2.10 per share to $3.48 per share, and recording a 65.7% growth in share price over that period, which is 90 days. That's an incredible growth. Temple & Webster recorded 27.5% share growth over the same 90-day period, jumping from $10.20 in mid-June to $13 as of close on Tuesday. So clearly, e-commerce, absolutely the shining jewel of retail in Australia, both from a business success and a business survivability perspective, but also from a share price growth perspective. It is absolutely wiping the floor with most other business models and business types at the moment, which makes absolute sense when you consider that both countries, both New Zealand and Australia, are absolutely getting smashed by ongoing rolling lockdowns, COVID lockdowns by our respective governments. In Australia, the state governments, federal government, and in New Zealand, our national government locking the country down. And in fact, Auckland still being under level 4 lockdown, which is the most significant or highest level of lockdown that we have. So we would expect online and e-commerce to continue to be growing in the absence of physical retail being able to be open. And this next article, or this next report, this next news report really speaks to the absolute damage to the wider business ecosystem that these lockdowns are having. KIKIK enters voluntary administration for a second time in 2 years. Again, a report from Power Retail. So they've collapsed into administration for the second time after it was acquired by Texas-based retailer Erin Condren in June of 2020. Now, this company is a stationery business. It was founded in Melbourne in 2001 by Christina Carlson and Paul Lacey. They entered voluntary administration again after their sale to Texas-based Erin Condren Designs. They first entered voluntary administration in March of 2020, owing $20 million to creditors, and it was sold in June 2020. And they've been able, as a commentary from their new owners, they've said they've been unable to withstand the massive impact of ongoing lockdowns in Australia, Singapore, and New Zealand. It has been a massive battle for businesses to survive in recent months, said CEO Paul Lacey. In a statement, we've taken numerous urgent steps to find a way through, but the sheer impact and magnitude of lost sales due to COVID lockdowns and the risks for directors associated with continuing to trade with such significant uncertainty ahead gave no choice. The loss of revenue from forced and extended closure of so many of our stores due to COVID pandemic as part of the government-ordered lockdowns has taken a direct, massive, and insurmountable toll. With no clear end in sight to lockdowns, EC have decided that in these unprecedented and extraordinary circumstances, the risks are too great for them to continue to fund the business. Now, I just want to put in my 2 cents worth here, and I think my position on this is, and I don't want to receive hate mail over this because everybody has their own opinion, everybody has their own take. But I think this elimination strategy, I think this lockdown strategy in Australia and New Zealand is clearly not working. It is clearly unsustainable. It clearly cannot continue. And in particular, in New Zealand, our elimination strategy is hiding to nowhere. We originally went into this most recent level 4 lockdown based on a single community case of COVID being reported in the community. And that just cannot continue. We to a degree, are a laughing stock of the rest of the world in terms of going into lockdown at the hint of COVID in the community. And it is my personal belief we are going to have to figure out a way to live with this in our communities and our healthcare system. And if we were to put the amount of bailout money and the wage subsidies and all of the other funding that we've put into this COVID response, if we were to put that into the healthcare system instead to be able to cope with a potential increase in numbers of, say, for example, emergency room cases due to COVID, et cetera, et cetera. If we were to put that same in New Zealand, I think the tally so far is up to about $60 billion spent to deal with COVID. If we turn around and spent that same $60 billion on our healthcare system and bolstering the healthcare system to deal with potential COVID fallout, and we put personal responsibility back on people, hey, look, if you want to lock yourself down, if you feel you're at risk, then go ahead, lock yourself down and stay at home. If you feel like wearing a mask is going to help, absolutely wear a mask. If you feel like taking a vaccine is going to help, absolutely take the vaccine. But this approach to absolute eradication from the community is a fool's errand, in my personal opinion. I think it's never going to happen here in New Zealand. It's never going to happen in Australia. And we have to open businesses back up so that they can trade, because otherwise we are going to have no tax money coming in at all to be able to pay for everything the government is trying to do. It's punching holes in the bucket at the same time it's trying to dump water in the top of the bucket. It just does not work. So enough end rant for now, but this is just yet another example of a business going to the wall as a result of ongoing lockdowns. This is totally unsustainable. The business community wants to get back to work. Retailers want to get back to work, and people want to be able to get back out in society, and they can take the precautions that they would for any type of flu. If they're ill, they can stay home. If they're afraid of being exposed, then they stay home. So anyways, that's enough on my position on these lockdowns. They're absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. Anyways, next news story. WhatsApp launches a test of in-app business directory, a report from Inside Retail. And this has been announced by Facebook across a number of channels, including its own blog. And so basically they obviously own the WhatsApp messaging service. And on Wednesday, they launched a new feature to make it possible to search for businesses within the app for the very first time. And the test is being run. It's a beta test in Sao Paulo, Brazil for now, which allows WhatsApp users to find shops and services through a directory in the app. It's the latest feature in Facebook's drive to bolster e-commerce on its services. And there was a statement from Matt Edema, Facebook's vice president of business messaging, and he said this could be the primary way that people start a commerce process in WhatsApp. And obviously WhatsApp, unlike Facebook and Instagram, they don't run ads. When you log into WhatsApp and when you're in a group and when you're having chats, either one-on-one or to a group, there is no ads that you see. And so obviously this provides a way for businesses to get their name out in front of customers through this business directory. And presumably it'll be a regionalized business directory, and presumably it'll have a search function, etc. And that will, in Brazil, WhatsApp already has a phenomenal uptake as the primary communication channel of choice between customer and business. Much like, I guess, Facebook Messenger is a very, very common communication channel in ANZ between businesses and customers. And so this feels very much like we're getting to a place where WhatsApp is introducing almost a quasi marketplace of businesses being listed on its app and being region specific. And this feels like they're headed in the same direction that Afterpay has headed with their business directory. Now, we know that if we look at the stats of traffic going to these types of in-app directory, we know that the traffic is absolutely phenomenal. And if you are a business listed in that directory, both in terms of being able to communicate with that business through, in this case, WhatsApp, or in the case of Afterpay, being able to do business with that business and transact using the Afterpay functionality, it can drive tremendous demand and tremendous conversion for those businesses that are listed in those respective directories. So I expect this to be a success for WhatsApp. I expect it to be a success for the businesses that list on the business directory inside of WhatsApp. And I expect this to roll out globally. I don't know, obviously, when it's going to happen, but this makes absolute sense. If they don't want to go down an ad-supported model in WhatsApp and they want to go down the directory path instead, Makes a lot of sense. It preserves the user experience within the app, and you can still go to the tab of the business directory tab if you so desire, and then obviously presumably communicate with them via WhatsApp directly from that directory as well. And they're obviously bringing in transactional capabilities, the ability to transfer money, to pay via WhatsApp. So there is commerce functionality coming to WhatsApp. So this feels like a very logical next step to be able to inject business information into the WhatsApp experience overall. So watch this space. Now, the next piece of news, again from Inside Retail, Briscoes Group half-year record tempered by customer uncertainty. Briscoes Group, which is effectively a homewares, and it's almost like a department store, but it's really focused on homewares here in New Zealand. They delivered a 69% spike in net profit during the first half of financial year 2022, reaching a new record of $47.4 million. That's net profit. So well done, Briscoes. And they said that sales for the period grew 22.58% to $358.4 million, despite around 50 days of retail store closure. So they're pretty proud of themselves, which makes sense. And they said that online sales represented 16% of total revenue for the half year and will continue to be improved, Rod Duke said. Managing director is Rod Duke. So, but what they did call out, they said there is some risk to future profitability, and they cannot, it's very difficult for them to forecast because the current trading restrictions, particularly in Auckland, as we continue to be in never-ending lockdowns with no end in sight, they can't predict when that's going to end and when the government is going to end lockdowns, and therefore they're going to get back to a more regular trading environment. Obviously, that's 16% of total revenue being e-commerce, not quite as good as Myers' 20%, but presumably they're gonna continue to work on that particular channel and see if they can get those numbers up, particularly as their physical stores continue in lockdown. Now, I have spoken about this before, but we continue to see the Chinese government crack down on tech companies and other related businesses inside of China. And another report from Internet Retailing says that effort by the Chinese government has wiped hundreds of billions of dollars off of the top Chinese companies' values over the last 2 or 3 months. Now, and they called out some specific tech companies and e-commerce businesses that have been affected and what it has done to them specifically. They called out Alibaba Group. The Alibaba Group, obviously, last year was planning to IPO their financial affiliate Ant Group, and it was expected to go IPO at about a $37 billion valuation. And obviously that was suspended by the Chinese government, and it still has no clear pathway to going public. And after they did that, the Chinese government also fined Alibaba $2.75 billion for abusing its market dominance. And they called out the fact that the company's U.S. listed shares have shed more than $400 billion in value. Wow. Nearly $500 billion in value since late October, when its founder, Jack Ma, made a speech that blasted Chinese regulatory system, which is widely regarded as the trigger for the government backlash that followed. Now, if we look at Tencent Holdings, which is China's largest gaming and social media company, it's lost more than $347.13 billion in market value since its shares reached a peak in mid-February. The company has been fined for failing to report past deals to antitrust regulators. Its $5.3 billion plan to merge China's 2 top video game streaming sites was blocked by the Chinese government, and it has been barred from entering music copyright agreements. Didi Global, China's largest ride-hailing company, became the target of a cybersecurity investigation by the Chinese authorities days after its New York IPO. And the Chinese government ordered its app to be removed from the Chinese App Store and barred it from registering new users. Its shares have lost about $37 billion, or more than 40% of its market cap, since it raised $4.4 billion from its IPO in on June 30th. Meituan, the food delivery company, became the target of an antitrust probe in April, experienced a sell-off in its shares last month after its founder and CEO, Wang Jing, posted an ancient poem on social media that was perceived by some as criticizing the government and President Xi Jinping. Meituan, whose shares have lost more than $154 billion in value since reaching their peak in February, have been criticized on other matters. So clearly what we are seeing here is a continued crackdown on any business that goes against the traditional narrative of what the Chinese government is trying to do in the market, the concept of fair play, the concept of effectively centralized control by the Chinese government and its whole of market view of businesses. When these businesses become too large, too powerful in their own right, and become too independent of oversight by the Chinese government, we are seeing what happens, and we are seeing the fallout of that right now. When these companies, who are Chinese companies, end up being listed, say, for example, on the New York Stock Exchange, those investors in the United States and globally that invest in those shares become absolutely vulnerable to anything the Chinese government does to those companies in China, and therefore it can wipe massive amounts of value off of their market capitalization, which has a direct impact on the value of the shares that those international investors hold in those companies. So I think this is going to have an ongoing chilling effect of businesses investing in Chinese companies on foreign stock exchanges outside of China. I think the capital flows going into China are going to reduce dramatically. I think the Chinese government is going to continue its crackdown, and it's probably going to bar many more businesses from listing on foreign stock exchanges to try to keep them operating holistically inside China, where they can have better oversight and better control by the Chinese government. So this remains to be seen, but I think we've literally just scratched the surface of this. The Chinese government has signaled a massive change in regulatory direction for not only tech companies, but any business that it perceives in its current form being a threat to societal stability. The Chinese government is very happy to step in and either nationalize or heavily regulate these businesses, and I think that poses a risk of capital flows coming into China. But as I say, it remains to be seen. We will see what happens over the next 6 to 12 months to these companies as they continue to trade internationally, and in some cases get pulled off of international stock markets at the behest of the Chinese government. Now, we've got two other very big pieces of Shopify news, and I have posted about this to LinkedIn. However, for those of you watching on Facebook and watching on YouTube, you may not have seen my commentary on this. Two big pieces of Shopify news this week. They're actually pretty groundbreaking pieces of news, so I don't want to downplay them. Pause point of sale for New Zealand is ready to rock with ShopPay. What does that mean? Well, it means that the ShopPay payment gateway, which is the preferred payment gateway for Shopify stores for e-commerce, is now integrated with the wireless chip and tap terminal card reader in New Zealand. So what that means is, historically, before this integration was rolled out, before this availability was rolled out, anybody using the Shopify POS in New Zealand had to use a third-party payment terminal service. They had to manually type into that terminal each transaction value. Then once the transaction was completed by the customer and the payment was confirmed and received and approved, then they had to go back into Shopify POS and close out the transaction as complete. Now, as you can imagine, the risk with that is that when you're manually typing a transaction value into a terminal, you can get it wrong, you can make a mistake, you can undercharge, you can overcharge, and then obviously there's extra effort, there's extra time, there's extra hassle, there's extra friction at the point of sale when you've got to manually type a transaction into a terminal, when you've got to manually process that transaction within the point of sale interface. So the fact that this is natively integrated, seamlessly uses the ShopPay payment gateway by Shopify, which is a white labeled Stripe payment gateway, this just makes it so much easier for New Zealand merchants to adopt Shopify POS in this country. And with their impending rollout of their new location control configuration functionality in Shopify, which means that you will be able to identify your retail locations, for example, as only being able to sell for click and collect online versus having that inventory being available for web sales ship to door. When you take those two pieces of functionality, you combine them together, it makes POS a much more attractive end-to-end omni-channel commerce proposition on the Shopify platform than ever before. So big news by Shopify. The other big news by Shopify this week is the release of Shopify Markets. Now, what is Shopify Markets? It is a suite of cross-border commerce functionality that allows businesses, especially small and medium-sized businesses, to deal with all of the complexity and all of the cost of doing cross-border e-commerce. So in other words, if I'm in New Zealand and I want to sell to Australia, I want to sell to Europe, I want to sell to the United States, I want to sell to Canada, I want to sell to South America, there are massive complexities in doing that. And as a result of those complexities, many businesses, when they want to sell internationally, they will sell on a local marketplace in that market instead of selling via their own website into those markets and shipping cross-border. Shopify is making it easier now for them to continue to sell via their own website into those markets, and they've called out a specific suite of functionality depending on the tier of Shopify that you are on. What they've said is regardless of the Shopify plan that you are on, you will be able to manage how you sell to each market from one central interface. You'll be able to sell in 133 currencies with Shopify payments. You'll be able to provide local payment options with Shopify payments. You'll be able to sell in up to 20 languages, set up custom domains for each market. You'll be able to have smart settings to optimize market operations. And then if you're on advanced Shopify or Shopify Plus, over and above that suite of functionality, you'll be able to estimate and collect duty and import taxes automatically at checkout. You'll be able to set custom pricing per market with Shopify payments. You'll be able to customize your catalog and storefront per market, including rounding rules for each currency to where you can round up or round down to the nearest dollar, for example. And you'll be able to manage fulfillment locations on a per market basis. So that is an absolutely massive announcement. Now, what's interesting about this new Shopify Markets functionality is it was never mentioned at Shopify Unite only a couple of months ago. So they've obviously kept this under wraps. They've been very tight-lipped about it. They knew that this was going to be pretty game-changing. So good work, Shopify. This is a pretty amazing turn of events, and absolutely congratulations on getting that out there into the market and making it easier for particularly small and medium-sized businesses to do business on the Shopify platform, both domestically and internationally, online and via POS. Congratulations. Well done. Now, this week, as of yesterday, we always do every single week religiously on a Thursday, New Zealand time, 11 a.m., we drop our new podcast episodes at the Coalface podcast with Jason Greenwood. It's on every major podcast platform. So whether you're using Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, it doesn't really matter what podcast engine you use. We are there. Episode 96 dropped yesterday, and I had an amazing interview with the founder and managing director of Charm.io. They are a DTC or direct-to-consumer SaaS platform that ranks to over 2 million direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands based on a whole range of information and data points about those businesses that are unique to the Charm platform. And so this is that data is used by Charm subscribers. And those subscribers typically are composed of investors, product teams, and marketers to research the best brands to target, invest in, learn from, or sell to in the market across a D2C. So go and check out that episode. It was a fantastic episode. I really enjoyed my conversation with David from Charm. He is an expert in direct-to-consumer e-commerce, and so it was really interesting to get his take on where the D2C market is headed. Now, we are at episode 96. As I said, we are only 4 episodes away, 4 beautiful episodes away from episode 100 of our podcast, and I'm super stoked that we are sneaking up on episode 100. Now, we will be running a draw in early October. The draw will open via a LinkedIn post that I will be putting out on October the 7th. And I will be putting out a draw, a merchandise draw. I'm working with a number of vendors and partners and people I've had on the podcast, etc., to put together a bundle of merch from these various different partners. So we're talking things like hats and t-shirts and jackets and water bottles and all sorts of things. I am working with a lot of partners and a lot of vendors to put together, hopefully my goal is to get 100 products to celebrate 100 episodes. So if I can get 100 pieces of merch across all of my partners and wonderful sponsors, etc., and we can put that together, my goal is to create a prize draw in celebration of 100 episodes. And so I'll be announcing more about that in the days to come, but it will be a draw that will originally be called out on LinkedIn. You'll be able to comment on my post on LinkedIn at that time. And you will be able to take what I will ask you to do. I will ask you to take a screenshot of your favorite podcast platform, whether you get your podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever. I will ask you to take a screenshot showing that you are subscribed to the Coalface podcast or are following us on your favorite podcast platform. You will post that screenshot in response to my thread. That will get you into the draw for this merch drop / celebration of our 100 episode milestone. So keep an eye out for that. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, please go to your favorite podcast engine and subscribe today because you do not want to miss out. It is an exciting thing. 100 episodes for somebody like Joe Rogan is nothing. 100 episodes for somebody like a Jason Calacanis or somebody like that who has a top 5 podcast is absolutely nothing. But for somebody small like me, trying to do this in my spare time, in addition to trying to run my business, 100 episodes is a massive milestone, and I'm super proud of it. I'm super thankful for all the guests who have been on the podcast to date. So I want to make it a big celebration. And then obviously at 200 and 300 and hopefully 500, etc., the celebrations will hopefully get bigger and bigger and bigger. So you want to subscribe so that you stay in the know as this happens. So thank you again for joining me on this Friday afternoon. It has been lovely having you here, and I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I hope you've gotten something out of it, and I hope you come and join me next Friday as we continue to cover the news of the week on @the Coalface Live. Cheers, guys. Have a fantastic weekend. Catch you soon.